Suge Knight was one of the scariest dudes in the rap game for decades. He allegedly threatened to kill Eazy-E's mother if he didn't let Dr. Dre out of his Ruthless Records contract. And then, Dre linked up with Suge to create the most powerful label in the game, Death Row Records. They ran the entire West Coast together, but not before long, they started a beef that eventually got Suge Knight locked up for murder. It's a wild story that most rap fans don't know about. So today, we're breaking down the entire beef and how Suge ended up killing his own homie over the situation. Let's get right into it. Back when NWA was blowing up, it seemed like they would be putting on for the West Coast for years. They were the hottest rap crew in the game, but then everything fell apart over money issues and personal beef. According to some sources, Dre called in Suge to look at the financial situation, and he found out that Eazy and NWA's manager, Jerry Heller, were taking advantage of everyone and filling their own pockets with most of the money coming in. Dre wanted out of the situation, but Eazy wouldn't release him from the contract with Ruthless. Since Eazy wouldn't do it the legit way, Suge handled everything for Dre. Back then, Suge was just getting into the music game and had been a bodyguard for dudes like Bobby Brown. But he already had a violent reputation after he allegedly dangled Vanilla Ice off of a hotel balcony and threatened to drop him if he didn't sign over the royalties to Ice Ice Baby. Suge and his crew allegedly threatened Eazy with baseball bats to convince him to release Dre. And when Eazy refused, Suge pulled out a piece of paper with Eazy's mother's address written on it. Eazy signed the documents to release Dre. And that's when the entire West Coast changed. Dre, the DOC, and Suge created Death Row Records in '91. And by '92, they were already making massive waves in the industry. Dre dropped his solo album, The Chronic, which went triple platinum and was the first time most people had ever heard Snoop Dogg too. And when Snoop dropped his debut in '94, it was already clear that Death Row was taking over. Before '95, there was already some issues between the East and West Coast. But then, Suge made the beef official after he called out Diddy at the '95 Source Awards. That same year, he paid for Tupac's bail and signed him to Death Row. And that's when everything went crazy. Pac thought Diddy and the Notorious B.I.G. knew he was gonna get set up and robbed in New York and didn't warn him about it. So when Suge wanted to start a war with the East Coast, Pac was all about it. A lot of the details didn't come out until later, but Suge kept Death Row on top of the game with all kinds of violence and brutality. He would beat employees over small issues, attack two rappers for using a phone without asking, and everyone in the company was terrified of him. Plus, Death Row was bringing in more street dudes and giving them work. By the time Pac released his album, All Eyes on Me, in '96, Dre was already tired of the vibe. According to sources close to the situation, Dre didn't like all the violence and street activity going on around the studio, so he decided to leave Death Row and create his Aftermath label. Even though Dre and Suge didn't have a huge fight or anything, Suge took it like Dre crossed him. Pac wasn't cool with the situation either, and he aired Dre out on the track Toss It Up and said, "No longer Dre Day, Eddie Vedderci. Blown and forgotten, rotten for plotting child's play. Check your sexuality, as fruity as his Alizé. Quick to jump ship, punk trick, what a dumb move. Cross Death Row, now who you gonna run to?" Suge and Pac started dissing Dre every chance they got and were spreading rumors about his sexuality too. But Dre leaving Death Row isn't the only reason he had beef with Suge. Before NWA ever existed, Dre was in a collective called World Class Wrecking Crew back in the '80s, and that's when he met Miss Chalet. She was only 16 at the time, but they linked up and she sang on their track, Turn Off the Lights. Dre was 22 and already had kids, but he started dating Miss Chalet the same year that they met. Dating a child is already horrible enough, but to make the situation even worse, Dre physically abused Miss Chalet throughout their entire relationship. People close to the situation have backed up her abuse claims, and Miss Chalet suffered a broken nose, a cracked rib, and black eyes while she was with Dre. All the abuse pushed Miss Chalet into abusing pills and alcohol, and she finally left Dre after she got engaged to another woman while they were still together. That's when Suge stepped in and got her some help. He sent her to rehab to deal with the drugs and alcohol, and they eventually got married in '99 while Suge was locked up. Suge might have helped Miss Chalet get clean, but that doesn't mean their relationship was any better than when she was with Dre. According to Miss Chalet, Suge only hit her one time, but he actually dislocated her jaw with the punch. And when she filed for divorce in 2005, she discovered that their marriage wasn't even valid because Suge was still married to his ex-wife, Sharitha. Besides the drama that came from Dre and Suge being with the same woman, they also had beef over business deals. Suge claims that Dre signed a lifetime management deal with him in the '90s that gives Suge 30% of whatever Dre earns. So when Dre sold his headphone company, Beats by Dre, to Apple for around $3 billion in 2014, Suge tried to get 30% of Dre's cut. According to Suge, Dre tried to have him killed when he came for the money. In 2014, he was shot 6 times at a VMA party that Chris Brown hosted. Somehow Suge walked himself to an ambulance after the shooting, but he needed emergency surgery to save his life. Suge never worked with the cops to help them catch the shooter, but he believes that Dre is the one who tried to have him taken out. Then, just a year after he was shot at the party, the beef took a deadly turn and an innocent man tragically ended up losing his life. Suge came up with a dude named Terry Carter. They were both from Compton and ended up going into the music industry, and they had been homies for years. According to people close to Carter, he started trying to get Suge and Dre to squash their beef around 2014. But when Suge found out that Dre was working on the Straight Outta Compton movie without bringing him in, everything went south. Suge was allegedly pressed over how he was being portrayed in the movie, so he showed up on the set to confront Dre. When he tried to get through security, the situation escalated until a couple of off-duty cops had to step in and break it all up. Clee Bone Sloan was working on the movie too and confronted Suge that day. Sloan is an actor, but he had street ties too and had issues with Suge for years. After Suge was told to leave the set, Terry Carter allegedly called him and said that Dre wanted to meet up to settle the situation. Suge agreed to meet Terry at a local burger spot, and they started talking while they were both still sitting in their whips. That's when Bone allegedly ran up out of nowhere and started hitting Suge. Carter got out of his car to calm the situation down, and that's when Suge ran over him and Bone. Bone survived with serious injuries, but Carter was tragically killed after Suge drove over his head. Suge was charged with murder, and his story about how everything went down didn't hold up in court. Dre allegedly laughed at the idea that he ever wanted to have a peace meeting with Suge, and Suge claims that Dre paid Bone $300K to kill him. But if Bone actually wanted to kill Suge, it wouldn't make any sense for him to run up and punch him through his window instead of just shooting him. The trial was delayed over and over, and Suge tried everything to get out of it. 2 months after he killed Carter, Suge told the judge that he was going blind. Then a few months later, his lawyer said Suge might have a brain tumor. The tumor story was all cap, but in 2017, Suge actually had to be hospitalized because of blood clots, and the trial was delayed again. Then, in September 2018, Suge decided to plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter instead of facing the murder trial. He was sentenced to 28 years for killing Terry Carter, and he'll probably never see the outside again. He's almost 60 and has had a ton of health problems already, and he won't be eligible for parole until 2034. Suge has thrown all kinds of shots at Dre over the years, but Dre has always been low-key about the beef. He's never aired Suge out in interviews or anything like that, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have issues with him. There's no evidence that he actually put a bag on his head though. After Suge killed Terry Carter, his family tried to bring Dre and Ice Cube into a wrongful death suit. According to the family, Dre and Cube were responsible for hiring Clee Bone Sloan, who's a known gangster and criminal with a more than 10-year history of ill will, to kill Suge. For a while, it looked like Cube and Dre were gonna have to face major consequences of the situation, but then, in 2018, they were both cleared of any wrongdoing. At this point, there's really no reason for Dre and Suge to be beefing anymore, since Suge is probably locked up for the rest of his life. But unfortunately, it took the death of an innocent man to finally put an end to the drama they started back in the 90s. Rest in peace to Terry Carter.